I have a love-hate relationship with this man. He was one of the two major writers for Toho in terms of the kaiju tokusatsu genre. It was Takeshi Kimura and Shinichi Sekizawa. While Sekizawa was bright-minded and playful and colorful, Kimura was the total opposite of this. Kimura was a dark and drab and melancholy kind of dude. This is proof if you look at Kimura's writing credits. You know, let's look at the kaiju genre. He made Half Human, Frankenstein Conquers the World, Godzilla vs. Hedorah, Rodan, War of the Gargantuas, and if you look at a tokusatsu film, he wrote The Last War. He tended to make the movies where humanity itself was the bad guy. That's literally The Last War in a nutshell, which is a movie I highly recommend that people genuinely check out. It's a fantastic film, especially when rewatching it. And at the same time, in his kaiju films, he tended to make the monsters themselves the victims. Look at War of the Gargantuas and Frankenstein Conquers the World. Those are his two most famous examples of this, in my honest opinion, though he does this extensively in Half Human as well. There was a reason for this, I think. Kimura hated his life, and just about everything, including his job. It was like, as stated in the audio commentary for Destroy All Monsters, it's like he basically had a rainy cloud over his head at all times. Kimura hated his life, and just about everything, including his job. As David Callett said in the Ghidra the Three-Headed Monster audio commentary, Shinichi Sekizawa basically had a raining cloud over him at all times. And I think the war made him extremely pessimistic towards life in general, which is the opposite of Shinichi Sekizawa. He was, at one time, a huge communist advocate, a member of the Communist Party, which led him to being blacklisted a lot, which led him to being, even in Japan, being blacklisted. It led to him being ostracized, basically, by a lot of people. It led him to being incarcerated on several occasions, and so on and so forth. And later in his life, something made him hate groups of people, but not mind individuals. Like, he started hating the collective and started more moving towards individuality. For example, he liked Ishiro Honda. In fact, he loved working with Ishiro Honda, but he hated Toho. So again, this is an example of him liking the individual, but hating the whole. The individual here being Ishiro Honda, and the whole being Toho. And the reason I don't think I'd like him as a person is because of his constant negativity. Because I haven't read any interview with anyone or heard anything nice about this man in commentaries or in books, other than that he could write like a poet in many cases. He was just constantly down, and kind of like that person at a party who's always pessimistic, that you don't really want to hang around with because they are so negative towards everybody and everything. And in a way, he reminds me of Edgar Allan Poe. But both men were almost emo or gothic in nature. Like, I think of the kids from South Park. He is just a person I wouldn't want to be around. I would be the kind of person that would go up to Takeshi Kimura and say, here's the idea for a script, now make it. And then basically leave him alone because I wouldn't want to really work with him. However, he wrote like a poet, especially early on in his career, Takeshi Kimura. He was a genius coming up or giving the characters a certain element, especially in his respective genre, which was the kaiju and tokusatsu area. Kimura, towards the mid-1960s, even hated writing for kaiju films so much, he actually adopted a pen name, and that pen name was Kaoru Mobichi, which in Japanese is a very androgynous name, and Kimura specifically chose that for a reason, to make sure that no one knew that he existed. He seriously didn't want anyone to know who he was or what he did, because he was so ashamed of what he was writing, particularly in War of the Gargantuas. I distinctly remember that name being in War of the Gargantuas. While Sekizawa embraced the genre, Takashi Kimura hated it. Like he was known for saying, "Oh, I hate my writing. I write garbage." When in reality, he didn't. Some of them, admittedly, are, but especially early on in his career, they weren't garbage. They were very good and very thought-provoking films. And I do feel bad because he died in Tokyo, which was a city he absolutely despised. Not around anyone who loved him or he loved. He died utterly alone, and it was a slow and painful death of asphyxiation. But a part of me doesn't feel bad for him at the same time because he kind of brought it on himself because of how negative he was as a human being. But then again, he wrote like a poet, so like where do you draw the line is why I'm curious about this whole thing. As for his writing, Kimura is my personal favorite of the two. Again, it's Kimura and Shinichi Sekizawa. Both are fantastic at what they did. They both have a knack, but Kimura was more in line of something that I would write. Something that I would like to put on paper. This goes for anything. In fact, I will easily say, despite them, making some very lackluster scripts, Kimura and Sekizawa are my two favorite writers because they're literally so total polar opposite of each other, but they wrote somewhat of the same thing. And I would always look towards their stuff when writing my stuff. And it is interesting that when both Sekizawa and Kimura work together, you get a clashing mess. And my favorite example of this is Godzilla versus Gigan. There's a lot of dark stuff of like a dying, polluted world that the aliens need to get out of. Even the stuff during the battle itself between Godzilla, Gigan, Anguirus, and Ghidorah, with how the music plays and such, it's genuinely dark. It's genuinely, it reminds me a lot of the early 60s stuff in Godzilla history, despite it being a very silly premise, mixed with the overly comical and campy crap of the human protagonist. And as a result, it created an extremely uneven movie. Kimura actually didn't work on too many Godzilla films. So then why is he a topic here on the Godzilla vlogs? Well, he only worked on really the later Godzilla films, such as Destroy All Monsters, Godzilla vs. Hedorah, Godzilla vs. Gigan, and yes, even Godzilla vs. Megalon, even though that was actually mainly Shinichi Sekizawa and Jun Fukuda. However, it is his importance and influence as to why I'm including him in an episode of the Godzilla vlogs. Kimura was the first one to realize that we do not watch these movies for the human characters. As pessimistic as that sounds coming from me, as horrible in some ways just taking that statement on its own sounds, it's not. Kimura figured out very quickly that all the way back in 1955 when he wrote Half Human, he realized that the human characters should mainly be a vessel to carry on the plot. The real characters are the monsters themselves, which is why I think Ishiro Honda mainly gravitated towards Kimura, especially in his non-Godzilla works. Because I believe Ishiro Honda agreed with Kimura and saw this in Kimura. His biggest example of this is being, War of the Gargantuan. I'm going to list a few examples here. No one cares about the human characters in War of the Gargantuas. Maybe Kumi Mizuno's character, but even that's very lackluster. But you give a shit about Sanda having to kill his own brother, Gaira. You give a shit about Sanda saving Akemi, Kumi Mizuno's character. The only person left in the world that Sanda gives a shit about. In Half Human, which is admittedly an extremely uneven movie, you give a shit more about the adult creature when his son is killed. You root for him when he destroys the village and brutally kills the people that killed his own son. Especially since this monster is thought to be evil and dangerous, does absolutely nothing wrong. He's a very peaceful creature. He even saves Akira Takarada's character from dying when he is tied over the side of a cliff, which is a nice reference to King Kong, by the way. Seriously, put the two images side by side. But if you want more information on that, watch my Half Human review. I'm actually very proud of that one. And then we have the Human Vapor. No one really remembers the policemen or the journalists, but everyone remembers the title role because of his performance and his tragedy. You cry for him when his girlfriend at the end, for him and his girlfriend at the end, when she has no choice but to kill him and herself to stop the Human Vapor from going completely mad and continuing to kill. Which, by the way, the fact he felt this way towards his films was a reason why he hated them so much, which is just another reason why I don't think I'd like Kimura as a writer. He was very pessimistic of the fact that, oh, all we care about are the monsters. He hated that idea, even though he turned it into his own style. Whatever. He basically felt that the audience was so stupid to not care about the humans so much that he was basically just being a depressing jerk. As for his philosophy for going with individuals, that is blatantly clear in his film The Last War, which is, admittedly, I think his most pessimistic movie he's written. It is a movie that depicts World War III in the end and ends literally with a nuclear holocaust. I mean, how can you beat that in terms of pessimism? You get many sequences in that film with individuals trying desperately to halt or postpone the war. And what starts the war are mindless automatons off screen. You never see them. He doesn't give them the time of day because he knew it might generate sympathy for them. Here's a couple of examples of what I mean. Example 1. A man personally disarms a nuclear missile from launching, putting his own life at risk instead of running away like everyone else did. Another example is 3 men trying to desperately stop a mechanical malfunction from launching launching several missiles which would accidentally start World War III. Both sides even show major signs of relief as they succeed at postponing the war. But yet we never see the people who actually touch the button. We never see the people who actually make the decisions, let's go to war, because they are the mindless automatons, they are the collective. Well, these are the individuals. Kimura was also really good at writing docudrama-like procedural films. Look at Gorath and Destroy All Monsters, especially Destroy All Monsters. Both films have a lot of layers piling on top of each other that build off of each other to basically a massive, massive climax. In Gorath, we have to move the Earth, as ridiculous as it is. In Destroy All Monsters, it's to stop the alien invasion. Both films have something I love in movies, and that is stuff happening. Be it levers being pulled, people setting things up, or even just vehicles or jets swinging into action. Because stuff is happening, and I've always been a fan of that. And mix that with the fact that both films have great and pounding music scores by their respected composers, you sold me. Kimura did makes some total duds. And the one that truly comes to mind, in my opinion, and you can watch Ishiro Honda-thon for more of this, is King Kong Escapes. Kimura wrote King Kong Escapes. To me, Kimura was simply the wrong man to handle the job. The film is so upbeat and silly that I honestly think Shinichi Sekizawa would have been a more suitable man to handle the project. In fact, Sekizawa did handle the film that was supposed to be King Kong Escapes, Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster, and that film is full of colorful characters and fun moments. It's just chock full of them. And I still laugh when the human characters on Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster sneak into the red bamboo base with an uprooted bush. It's funny, mixed up with the music by Masaru Sato. It's really funny. And granted, Ishiro Honda, I felt, was also wrong to direct King Kong Escapes. That also has a huge aspect to it. To me, Jun Fukuda, Toho's other main tokusatsu director, would have handled the playful nature of King Kong Escapes much better, in my opinion. But again, you can watch Ishiro Honda-thon for that. Kimura just knew what to focus on more times than not. His dark nature made his films the more dramatic ones, the ones people tended to remember the most. They are the ones people look back to and say, that was actually really sad. War of the Gargantuas, Frankenstein Conquers the World, Rodan, those big films. And they are big films that stick out in your memory when you watch them, and they are genuinely great films. Because most of them are sad, and most of them are great, and I love them for it. Helping forge the way to how these kind of films are written and approached today. And that's one reason why I love Kimura so much, and why he's my favorite out of the two writers, despite his dark personality. Go on Facebook, like AN Productions, for all up-to-date information of what we're doing there, be it our show 3 Guys with a Twitch, which usually goes up on Wednesdays, but I don't know when this video is going to be up yet. And at the same time, we're also making 2 short films. We're making FM 132.9, which is about a giant monster attack and a radio station reporting on it. And we're also making another film called Some Terrible Grief. Both films in which shot in a process known as Super Scope, and we're really excited to play around with that process. And follow us on Twitter, and Productions on Twitter. Lots of craziness goes on there. Follow us on Twitch. You can subscribe if you want, but I don't recommend it because I don't want you to waste your money. Join Geeks for Geeks, and in the end, this is Adam Noyce of AN Productions saying sayonara.